In a small, unassuming town tucked between rolling hills, there lived a man named Theo. He was a quiet, reserved individual, known for his profound intelligence and an almost otherworldly ability to solve complex problems. But there was something that set him apart from the others, something far more extraordinary than his intellectual prowess. Theo had the ability to harness the power of his mind in ways that no one had ever imagined. Theo first discovered his mind power as a child. It wasn't a sudden revelation, but rather something he stumbled upon by accident. He had been sitting in his room one afternoon, bored and frustrated with the slow pace of his homework. His eyes wandered to the small, chipped pencil lying on his desk. Without even thinking, he stared at it, willing it to move. And, to his surprise, it did. At first, it had only been a slight twitch, an imperceptible shift. But as he focused harder, the pencil lifted off the desk and hovered in midair for a few seconds before falling back down. Theo's heart raced. He had done it. The power wasn't just in his hands, it was in his mind. For the next several years, Theo experimented in secret, developing his newfound ability. He started with small objects, picking up a pencil, lifting a cup, even turning the pages of a book. But soon, he realized that his mind could do more than simply move things. It could shape reality. He could influence people's thoughts, bend situations to his will, and even see the future with startling clarity. In college, Theo began to notice the limits of his powers. While he could manipulate objects with ease, there were things he couldn't control. His mind, for all its strength, couldn't stop time or reverse irreversible actions. And, perhaps most strikingly, Theo couldn't change his own emotions, not with his mind, at least. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't erase the loneliness that often consumed him. He had no one to share this secret with, no one who would understand. His mind, powerful though it was, couldn't conquer the emptiness inside. One late evening, as Theo sat in his dimly lit apartment, lost in thought, a knock echoed at the door. Startled, he opened it to find an elderly woman standing on the threshold. She wore a long, flowing coat of indeterminate color, her hair silver and braided tightly against her scalp. Her eyes, sharp and intelligent, fixed on Theo without hesitation. "I know what you are," she said softly, her voice rich with wisdom. "And I've come to warn you." Theo, though caught off guard, wasn't frightened. He had grown accustomed to his abilities, and he had learned not to let them rule him. Still, there was something unnerving about the woman's presence. "Warn me," he repeated. "Who are you?" "I'm someone who has walked the path you are on," she replied. "My name is Mara, and I was once like you, a person who believed that the mind could solve everything. But there are limits to what the mind can do, and I'm here to show you." Theo was skeptical. "I've already tested my limits," he said, his voice tinged with arrogance. "I know what I'm capable of. There's nothing I can't do." Mara nodded slowly, as if she had expected this response. "You think you know your powers, Theo, but there is something far greater you have yet to learn." She reached into the folds of her coat and pulled out a small, worn book. The cover was faded and the pages were frayed, as though it had been passed down through generations. Mara handed it to him. "This book will show you the path," she said cryptically. "Read it, and you will understand." Theo took the book from her with little more than a glance, dismissing it as some form of ancient mysticism or trickery. "I don't need this," he muttered. "I already have the answers." But Mara's eyes were steady. "There is one thing you cannot change, Theo. No matter how powerful your mind becomes, you cannot escape the human experience. The mind cannot conquer the heart." Theo watched as Mara turned and walked away, disappearing into the night without a sound. He stood there for a moment, the book in his hands, feeling a strange unease settle over him. Later that night, unable to ignore the nagging feeling in his chest, Theo opened the book. Its pages were filled with stories, tales of people who had once possessed great power over their minds, only to lose everything because they had tried to control more than they could. Each story was a cautionary tale of someone who had reached too far, who had sought to reshape the world around them and in doing so had lost their humanity. As he read, a deep understanding began to settle in him. The stories were not just about power, but about balance. The mind, he realized, could achieve incredible things, but it was the heart that gave life meaning. His powers had allowed him to manipulate everything in his world, but he had overlooked the one thing that truly mattered, the people in his life, the connections, the emotions that defined what it meant to be alive. Theo spent the next few days in a daze, contemplating the lessons in the book. He tried to use his mind to change the way he felt, to eliminate the loneliness that had always followed him. But no matter how hard he focused, nothing worked. His mind could bend reality, but it could not fill the void inside him. Then, one morning, a breakthrough came not through mental discipline, but through an act of pure human connection. He was walking down the street, lost in thought, when he saw an elderly man struggling to lift a heavy bag. Without thinking, Theo rushed to help him. The old man smiled gratefully, his eyes twinkling with warmth. They exchanged a few words, and for the first time in years, Theo felt something shift within him, a warmth, a spark of connection. It was as if the very act of helping someone, of sharing that small moment of kindness, filled the emptiness he had been chasing for so long. In that instant, Theo understood Mara's lesson. The mind could achieve wonders, yes, but it was the heart, the relationships, the kindness, the emotions, that made life truly meaningful. Power without compassion was hollow. From that day forward, Theo used his abilities for good, but not as a means of control or domination. He learned to temper his mind's power with a deep respect for the human experience. He didn't shy away from his gifts, but he no longer sought to manipulate the world around him. Instead, he embraced the world as it was, understanding that sometimes the greatest power of all lay in simply being human. And in the years that followed, Theo found a peace he had never imagined. His mind could move mountains, but it was his heart that allowed him to truly live.